Okay, so here is the car. It's covered with leaves. Pretty dirty on the inside. Pretty nasty. I don't think the hood will stay up. Yeah, it's not going to stay up. Can't do it with the camera on there, but yeah, it's pretty crusty and dusty. See a little sunlight through the floorboard. So yeah, let's get this thing cleaned up a little bit, then get it in the shop. Alright, so this is a 71 Nova 4-door. It's got a 307 and a power glide in it. I got it in a package deal last year when I bought 5 Novas from a guy shutting down his body shop. He had driven this thing to where it was sitting when I bought it in the early 90s. The last tag on it is 1989, so sometime around then it got parked. He picked it up a few years later, 2 or 3 years later, so I'm pretty sure it's been sitting since at least 1989. Now, he did drive it to his shop from where he bought it from, said it smoked the whole way. So we know it was a running, driving car when it parked, but the engine was probably already wore out or had some other issues. Okay, so as soon as I bought this car, first thing I did, I took a ratchet, stuck it on the crank bolt, tried to spin it over, the engine is stuck. Now sometimes you can get them unstuck, that's what I'm going to try to do here. It might not be stuck real bad, it might be stuck a little bit. Sometimes they're stuck, and there's nothing you can do. Now most of the time, if they're stuck a little bit, it's okay. If they're stuck a lot, even if you get it unstuck and cranked up, the rings are shot. So it's, you know, it's nice to get them running, but they probably won't have any compression. Now what we're going to try to do is try to get this thing cleaned up a little bit. I'm going to get the hood off of it because only one hinge is bolted up. So I'm going to get the hood off of it, try to get it where I can get in there and film, see if we can get spark plugs out, maybe get a bore camera down in the bores, get some Marvel Mystery Oil down there. Hopefully we can get this thing to break free and crank up. And the glass in this thing is, the windshield is not bad. It's not broken. So we want to try to save that because 4-door windshields are hard to find. They're taller than 2-door windshields. Well, shoot. Let's see if we can get this right. Okay, so here we are. Now, this is a pretty complete car, which is why the guy kept it. Was he had a bunch of Novas, he was going to build one, and he wanted to have a pretty good blueprint of exactly how the air conditioning went and a bunch of other wiring, at least really close. Maybe not exactly for this model year and engine, but you know what I mean. Now, we could look on the Emission sticker. It's a 307 2-barrel, and if you look right here, you can always tell by these if you can't get to the VIN, these are still there. You can look down here and say that this vehicle is applicable to the 1971 model year. So that's how you can tell that it's a 71 other than the VIN if this has not been changed. You know, if it's an all original vehicle, you can look at this pretty quick and tell what year it is. Okay, so what we're going to do, I'm going to take the air cleaner off, see if the carburetor linkage will move. Maybe we can get some stuff down in there. And then I'm going to take some spark plugs out, see if I can get a funnel down there and get some Marvel Mystery Oil in the cylinders. Let's see if the linkage will move some. Well, like I said, it's not, it doesn't mean everything, but it's usually a good sign when the carburetor's not frozen up. Now obviously some of the wires chewed up. This looks like something, there's a switch under the dash with some stripped back wires. Looks like somebody was trying to hot wire it to get it running. Maybe they didn't have the key to it, and that would explain why the steering column is busted, and there's also no steering wheel. So we'll have to deal with that if we get it running. Alright, so I cleaned up the engine, got most of the rat turds and leaves and stuff off the intake. Cleans up pretty good. The choke linkage even works. So, like I said, that's a good sign. The AC compressor is not locked up. Usually if these A6 compressors sit, they'll be locked up, and this one is not, so that's a pretty good sign. Okay, so I was able to get all the plugs out, and the only one that had anything on it other than just a little bit of soot was the number 3 plug, and it's actually got some rust on it. I don't know if the camera's going to focus on that, but so likely number 3 cylinder is the one that's got this thing stuck. Now it could be all of them, but usually when you get a rusty plug, there's been some moisture in there. So that's the one I'm going to focus on. I'm going to put some oil in it first, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut the belt, take the fan blade out of the way, and then I'm going to put a pipe wrench on the lower crank pulley, or the crank pulley, and see if I can get more leverage, because you really don't get much leverage on a crank bolt. You don't want to break it, so you go easy on it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put a big pipe wrench on the crank pulley, see if I can get it to move a little bit. You get a lot more leverage that way, and maybe we'll turn this thing over. Okay, so we got our mystery oil in the cylinder. Now I've already hooked my wrench on the crank pulley once, kind of like this. Tried to move it, it didn't want to move. So I'm gonna hook it over here on this side, see if I can push down on it without busting my knuckles, which is almost no chance of it. Okay, that ain't moving. So I'm gonna go the other direction. No. Alright, we're going to let that sit for a while. Okay, so I'm going to get this pipe wrench on here. I've got a piece of pipe to put on the pipe wrench, which I think that might be why they call it a pipe wrench, but I'm not sure. And maybe this will be enough leverage. Okay, it moved. There we go. There we go. All right. This thing's gonna. It feels tight. I can feel a little bit of resistance. All right. Let's see if we can go the other way now. This is how you break your hand if you ain't careful. Okay, so we got it moving, but there's definitely a tight spot in it, which is where I've got it right now. See if we can get it past this tight spot, back around again. It might not do it again. That was a good one. Let's see if we can do a little bit more by hand instead of using the bar. Oh yeah. I'm going to see if I can turn it over by the crank bolt, but I doubt I can. Still feels pretty tight. Yeah. And see, I don't know if the starter is going to turn that over as tight as it is. Okay, so I think I'm going to leave this thing sitting overnight, but what I'm going to do first is I'm going to put some mystery oil down in the carburetor. So to go down in the intake, hit the backs of the valves, maybe get in some of the cylinders. I'm going to spin the engine over a few times after I do that. Since my linkage works, I can do that, and hopefully some of that is going to get down into some of the cylinders. Now, you're probably not going to get all cylinders that way, but you're going to get a few of them. And someone has robbed the vacuum port out of the intake right here. So what I'm going to do, take my little squirt bottle here, fill it back up with mystery oil. And I'm going to put this down in my hole in my intake where my vacuum port went. And I know I can get the back 2 cylinders probably with some of that. So now I'm going to spin the engine over a little bit more, rotate everything. Maybe some of the valves are opening. Hydraulic lifters, you don't know if they're going to move the rocker arms any, but maybe. Maybe you're going to move it a little bit to get some of that lubricant to some other cylinders. Okay, so it's the next morning. Now this thing spins over by hand a little bit easier. It didn't get a lot easier overnight with everything soaking, but it's still a little bit easier. I think the starter will turn it over without too much trouble. Now, the electrical on this thing is pretty scary. Let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so let me show you why I'm not going to just throw a battery in this thing. I've got some chewed up wire right here. Looks like some kind of rodent or something got in there and chewed that up. Got a piece of lamp cord here that goes down under here somewhere. I have no idea what's hooked to that. I've got another piece of lamp cord here that goes into the car. I've got a red wire here that's been chewed up. Got another red wire coming out and going to the positive side of the coil. And there's a couple of wires sticking out from under the dash. Looks like somebody had jumped out the battery to the ignition and put a little switch in there. And then I'm not sure where that one goes, but maybe it's just trapped down there and it doesn't go to anything. Maybe just to go to the battery. Anyway, at some point there was either no key and they had to hot wire the car, or something burned up in it. Plus the chewed up wires, it's been sitting a really long time, so I'm afraid to put a battery in it and set this thing on fire. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hook a wire up to the starter and hook a ground up to the car, run another wire over to the coil, and see if I can get this thing to fire over. Okay, so here's the plan. First thing I'm going to do is clean up all this mess underneath the car. I've got a ton of Marvel mystery oil that dropped out from under this thing, a bunch of leaves and shells and probably some rat poop too that came off the engine when I cleaned everything up. I'm going to get all that cleaned up underneath it, so I got a clean place to get under. I'm going to take the transmission cover off. I'm going to take the starter off because it looks like it's soaked with Marvel mystery oil now. I've got another starter for a 153 tooth flex plate that I'm going to put on there. I'm going to test it first, make sure it's good to go. Bolt it on. I'm going to put a jumper between the solenoid start and the battery terminal on the starter. Then I'm going to use my starting stand that I made for my test stand. I'm going to run it from this solenoid here, so I have a remote solenoid. I'm going to run this down to the starter, hook that up. I've got an ignition wire for my ignition switch I'm going to run to the coil. I'll hook the negative cable up to the alternator bracket like it was from the factory. Have the battery out here. I should be able to start this thing relatively safely just to spin it over. Once I get it spinning over, make sure the starter's okay. We'll throw some plugs and wires in it, maybe clean the points up on it. Hopefully the coil is okay, and we'll see if we can get this thing to fire up. Okay, so I got the starter off, and if you didn't know, a 307 will normally have a 153 tooth flex plate, not a 168, and the starters are different. The nose is positioned different. Now, you can swap the flex plates and swap the starter and you're fine, but if you have a 307 and you need a starter for it, you're probably going to need a 153 tooth starter, and it's going to be a little bit different, and you're going to be hard to find. So I doubt the parts store is going to have one. Now, I did have one that came off another motor I pulled out of a car, and I checked it, and the Bendix did come out, but it wouldn't spin. So now we're going to check this one. Now I'm hoping this thing won't burst into flames because it's full of mystery oil and grease and everything else. Maybe it'll just start. I just want it to see the Bendix pop out and spin, and then I'll clean it up, and I'll know that it's good enough to at least try to spin the engine over with. And I could have just hooked it up in the car and tested it, but I prefer controlled fires. So what we're going to do is hook this up kind of like this. And I've got the switch off on my jump box. Make sure that's my start terminal. Yes. So I'm putting my cable across my start terminal and my power terminal so that the solenoid is energized as soon as I hit the power button. And I hook my ground on the back, and I'm going to bump this thing, and hopefully the Bendix is going to pop out. Alright, nothing happened. And I don't have a good ground. Try it now. All right, nothing. Okay, I got the starter on the car back on the table. And I got some jumper cables and a battery this time. So I'm going to hook up my negative over here, if it'll stay on there. Hook up my positive across both of those again. They should stay. Get my other end. Hook up my negative. And I'm going to just bump this positive. Now what I'm worried about is I've got all this stuff on this bench. And this thing's liable to shoot some sparks out. So hopefully I won't cause too much of a problem. We're going to see if this thing's going to jump out and spin in. Alright, so it does jump out, it doesn't spin. Alright, we're going to try the other one now. Maybe it'll start working. Let's see. Just maybe. These cables are not really that good at grabbing small stuff. Alright, let's see if this one will jump out now. Nope. Doesn't want to spin. Alright, so I took the starter apart, I cleaned the brushes on it, cleaned the armature up, everything on it looked okay. Probably not getting power from the solenoid to the motor. On the back of a GM starter, you've got the included solenoid. Power goes from the solenoid to here. Your battery hooks here, switches it to here, which is connected to there. So I'm guessing that that's the problem. And figure that out shortly. I didn't think I had to take that one loose. Okay. So I'm just going to clean my little contact wheel here with a brass brush. Get all the crap off of it. I'm going to clean my contact on the back of the post up, if I can get it loose. And one thing I'm doing is I'm leaving the run terminal out. Now the run terminal sends power back to the coil through the resistor wire while the engine's running. And I don't need that because this starter's not standing here. I'm just trying to get this thing cranked up. I'm going to have the run terminal bypassed anyway, so don't need it. And it just floats on this wheel right here and spins it so that power stays connected to it from the main power terminal. Okay, now we're going to test this starter, see if it's going to work. Took it apart, cleaned it up. It ought to work a little bit better. There we go. Okay, so here's what I've got. I got my test stand controller that I made hooked up to the car. I've got my ground cable going to my alternator bracket, like the factory battery cable did. I've got my positive going to my starter, and my solenoid is bypassed. So really the only power going to the car at all is to the starter, other than grounding through the engine. I'm going to hit the start button on this. Hopefully it's going to spin over and not have any issues. So let's see what happens here. All right. Sounds like a rough spot in it, but it spins over pretty good. Okay, so now that we've got it spinning over, I went and picked up a set of plugs. I went and picked up a set of points. Now, these are just like a universal set of points. They didn't have a separate condenser and points in, so I bought the kit with her together, and I'd rather have them separate. Anyway, they did not have any plug wires in stock, and these were all chewed up and broken and junk. So I went upstairs and I found another distributor cap I had with a set of plug wires already on it for a small block. So we're going to stick that on there, check the coil ohms, make sure that thing's going to spark, put the points on there. I might look at the points that are on it now, see if they'll work, but as long as this thing's been sitting, there's almost no chance of that. All right, so let's see if we can get this cap off, get these wires out of the way. Actually, what's in there looks really, really good. So maybe all I need to do is change the wires and check the coil. Okay. So I've got my ignition wire from my controller going to the positive side of the coil. Negative side is still hooked up. I've got my coil wire hooked up. I've got one spark plug wire hooked up to a spark plug right here. I've got it pushing against ground. Now I'm going to turn this ignition on first and make sure nothing burns up, because all I've got is all right, nothing happened. The fuse didn't blow, so we don't have anything shorted at least. So now let's turn that on and bump the starter button and see if we can see sparks here. And I don't know if you're going to be able to see it on camera. Yep, I got spark. Man, that's pretty awesome. Okay, so it's gotten too late for me to fire this thing up tonight, but what I'm going to finish doing tonight, I'm going to put the plugs in it, which I have not done yet. I'm going to fix a few vacuum leaks. Someone stole the vacuum tee behind the carburetor. That's missing, so I got to plug that up. I got to find a place to hook my vacuum advance up. Really don't think I'm going to need that, but I'm going to want as much advance as possible if this thing actually fires up. Now, still got to put my spark plugs in, spark plug wires on, close up all the advanced things, and rebuild the carburetor. All right, we're going to rebuild the carburetor real quick, so it'll be ready. There, good as new. Okay, so I got all the spark plug wires on. I've got my battery ready to go, ready to hook it up. I know I'm getting spark. I've got all my vacuum line sealed, and I also took the fuel line loose coming from the tank to the fuel pump, because I don't want that to suck anything nasty up and throw it into the carburetor. Now, I don't think there's much of a chance of it not already being nasty in the bowl of the carburetor, but I don't want to add to it if it is. The first thing I'm going to do is, since I don't have any starting fluid, I'm going to use some carburetor cleaner, spray that in the carburetor, maybe see if I can get it to try to spin over, and if it does, I'm going to pour a little gas in the fuel bowl of the carburetor and maybe see if the accelerator pump's working, see if I can get something to start somehow. So let's try that out. Okay, we're going to make sure that the engine will spin over. Okay, the engine spins over. Now I'm going to put a little fuel or a little carburetor spray in the carburetor. And I've got a fire extinguisher ready and somebody over there on the other side of the camera ready to help me push this thing out if it starts to catch fire. So now we're going to turn the ignition on and try to crank it. Nothing. All right, and maybe my carburetor cleaner isn't very good. Maybe starting fluid would be a lot better. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a wire off and verify that I'm getting spark. Actually, my coil wire is not hooked up, so I know I'm not getting spark. There we go. Okay, let's try this again. Okay, so I don't think my ignition's working. My light was coming on my switch and now it's not. So I'm gonna see if I got any fire again with one of the old plugs that came out. See if that'll move. Turn my ignition on and bump it. Okay, I'm getting spark. So that's not the problem. Let me see if I can get some more fuel in it. And I might have to get some starting fluid before I get this thing cranked up this way. And I don't know how much Marvel mystery oil got down in the exhaust and down in the intake. So I'm not sure how bad this thing's going to smoke or any of that. So if it cranks up, I'm not going to leave it cranked for long. All right, time to do a compression test. Okay, before I give up and do a compression test, I've got my screwdriver stuck down in the choke and I've got a socket holding part of the throttle open. So we'll see if it'll get some air into it and make a difference. Doesn't seem to. So we're going to do a compression test. All right, I'm going to start with the easy to get to cylinder first. Well, the plugs are definitely wet, so they were getting some fuel. Got a compression tester hooked up. We're going to look and see how it does. I don't know if y'all can see it or not. Leave ignition off. And to really do this right, you need the throttle all the way open. So I'm going to have Nathan come over here and hold the throttle all the way open. All right, so we're going to spin this over. See what kind of compression we got. Almost none. Now my gauge isn't holding either, but still it's not even trying to move. All right, I got this valve cover loose. I'm going to pop it off and kind of see what we're dealing with underneath. I'm going to find something to knock it loose with. Yeah, that'll work. I guess I should knock the dirt off of it first, but whatever. All right, looks kind of grimy under there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to hook my starter back up real quick and spin this over and see if any of them are moving. None of them look stuck. This one's either open or stuck, but it looks like that one's open. All right, let's spin this thing over, see if they're all moving. Well, that sucks. They're all moving, which means it's probably cylinder problems. All right. That did not go as planned. I really thought that after I got the engine broken loose, I was going to be able to get some spark and get this thing cranked up. Well, the spark came real easy. I didn't have to do anything. I mean, the coil worked amazingly because it looks terrible. I didn't have to change the points. So just really happy that I have spark. Really got excited, thought it was going to crank up fairly easy, and it didn't. I even tried some starter fluid and that didn't work. I went and got some thinking that maybe the carburetor spray was the problem, and it didn't happen. So I just don't have enough compression. Now, you know, you saw where I pulled the valve cover off and the rocker arms are moving, so my lifters are pumped up enough to open the valves up. Now, maybe some of the valves aren't closing, but I'm thinking it's probably a cylinder problem. The rings are probably just stuck and not doing anything. I couldn't even get my finger to blow off the spark plug hole. I put my finger over the spark plug hole, covered it up, spun the engine over, and it didn't have enough compression to blow my finger off the hole. So either a bunch of valves are trashed or, you know, the rings are completely shot. So you guys tell me what you want me to do with this car. It's a 71 four-door with a 307 and a power glide. We're going to try to make it look cool, act cool, be cool, do a super budget rebuild on the 307. You know, the 307 kits aren't as cheap as 350 kits, but, you know, I could throw some rings in it, you know, and maybe the bearings are okay, clean it up, hone it real quick, throw some rings in it, throw it back together, and see if we can make it make some noise other than just turning over. Anyway, subscribe if you haven't, like the video, leave me a comment, let me know what you want to do with this. I may sell it as is, I may get it running first, I may do something, try to make it look halfway decent, but you know, it's in pretty bad shape. Anyway, see you next time.